Welcome to coupleanerds presents Apartment Gardening. In today's small segment, we're going to be talking about Tradescantia fluminensis, or spiderwort or inch plant. This wonderful little plant, I'm super excited to be sharing with you guys. I think it's going to be super fun to cover. But the first thing we have to do is get all of our tools together. You're going to want small cups, soil, shears, bleach and water, and honey or growth agent. All of these are necessary for the well established growth of the plant once you cut it. So, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to poke a little bit of a hole in each of our cups filled with dirt. That way, we know exactly how much depth we have to work with. And we give a little bit of space for us to understand how much we're going to cut or how big the cutting needs to be. Once that's done, we can put those off to the side because we're going to be taking care of cutting first of all. So, a little bit about Tradescantia fluminensis. It was previously known as Tradescantia albiflora, but it was changed, I imagine, because they realized it was a different subspecies of Tradescantia. And there are a couple of different variants. I happen to have the variant that is tricolor, which means it just has three colors on it. It has a lovely sort of fuchsia, light purple, light pink color on the tips of the leaves. And the other parts of the leaves are a striped sort of white and green, which create this beautiful look for the plant. I think it's gorgeous that it has the three colors. It creates vibrancy without having like too many crazy colors involved, but it still looks super vibrant and beautiful. So I really appreciated the colors of this plant. It's a great house plant, but a little bit of a warning, sort of, is that it is also a vine, a creeping sort of plant. So if let's say if it's in a box with other plants, it will take over that box. Every single flower that you see on this plant can create new nodes in the ground. So, because they trail, each node puts down roots once it's touching the dirt. And so, you want to keep it small, you want to keep it bushy. That means trimming it constantly, making sure to keep it at a certain manageable level to where it's not trailing. Or you can have it in a smaller pot where it can't sort of keep growing. The way that you protect the plant too, because it is a creeping plant and you're keeping it in a small pot, is to make sure you're trimming it consistently to make sure that it's not overgrowing itself and becoming too leggy. Because if you let it grow too much, then what happens is the nodes on the side that is closest to the root base, they're all going to dry up, the leaves are going to fall off, and that purple, vibrant, beautiful color that I love completely disappears from the plant. So once we get our cuttings, once we trim them down to what we think would be a manageable, I would say probably 2 to 3 inch cutting, you're going to want to dip it in growth agent, or I found out honey works just as well. It's super amazing. So I happen to have some honey lying around that was left over from something else. And since I have a new jar, I can use this as my growth agent for the foreseeable future, which is awesome. And this happened to be some organic wildflower honey that I got from a friend, and I'm super happy to have that with me. And it came really handy for this project, I think. So, as you can see, I have these large sort of cuttings from the plant because I wanted to make sure that I cut it down enough that it could get that bushy sort of look to it. So I did cut down quite a bit while still leaving a good amount of the foliage intact. But as you can see, they're pretty big. So I did have to cut them down to a more manageable size, and I did sort of trim it off. And then dip it in the honey. The first plant, I did a little bit of a boo boo. You're not supposed to just put it in directly after the honey. You're supposed to wait a little bit, and I did not. I put it in immediately after dipping in the honey, and I don't know if it's going to survive the process because the appropriate way to do it is to dip it in the honey and then let it sit for 30 minutes to sort of absorb that, and then you plant it. So we'll see how that ends up going, and we'll go from there. So the other cuttings for the other 4 cups, I made sure to dip in the honey and then place on a paper towel to make sure that they could sit there for about a half an hour and sort of take in all of that, which was really fun. to just sit there and wait. There are a couple things I learned about this plant, just in preparation for growing and propagating it. The first thing is that it requires medium light, so you don't want it to be in too much sunlight, otherwise it will hurt the plant and it will eventually kill it. This is why it's a great house plant to have because it doesn't want to be directly in the sunlight. You also want to make sure that when you're planting it, not like these cuttings, but planting it in a full pot once it's ready, that you give it about 6 inches of depth to be able to spread its roots and grow and allow it to spread within reason, of course. But that's why it applies to the bigger potted plant I have here and not so much the cuttings. Right now, those are going into smaller little sort of planters so that they can grow their root base first, and then once they're ready to repot into a bigger pot, then we'll give them the nice 6 inch space, which I think will be lovely for them to keep growing and propagating. You also, and this is something that's super important to keeping your plants, really almost any plants, alive, is to allow the soil to dry thoroughly between waterings. You want to make sure that the soil on top as well as a little bit underneath, you want to stick like your pinky into the dirt a little bit, you to test it and make sure that it's dry enough so that you can still add water without causing root rot or without causing mold to grow on the top, or even mold to start growing on the plant itself, which is deadly. So you want to make sure that it's dry. This is why we here in our home, myself, DnDWife, and my husband, DME Guile, we've adopted a sort of auto watering system with piping as well as tubing that goes underneath into the soil near the plants to make sure that we water from underneath into the soil directly. That way it reduces the amount of mold that can grow on the top and spread to the plant. You also want to take note that because these are sort of vining plants, they do really tend to trail nicely once they start hanging off the side of the planter, which is why this was originally in a hanging planter to begin with. So that will look amazing in a home, I think, especially with the vibrant purple of the leaves and the flowers. It's just beautiful. I did forget to mention that the flowers on this plant are gorgeous. So not only is the plant itself tricolor with the three beautiful colors, but also the plant has flowers that are these like fuzzy little white things that are just so beautiful and delicate. I love them. So I think they'll be great to hang all around the home or just to have somewhere, that's not hanging necessarily, but on a shelf or something. I think that will look lovely. You also want to make sure that you water thoroughly, but allow that soil to dry. So you do want to make sure it has a good amount of water, but not too much. I know it's super difficult to really kind of gauge what to do, but I guarantee once you get the hang of it and once you start understanding what distress of plants means. So if you see like the leaves drooping, that usually means that they require a little bit of water. So you learn to look out for these little signs of distress that tell you when the plant is desperate for that water. And you don't want to get it too far into these sort of episodes. You don't want to get them to be too wilty because otherwise that can be a sort of point of no return for the plant, and it can just simply decide I can't keep going. So you want to make sure that they don't get too droopy, but that you allow it to dry enough. It also has this beautiful growth about every once a month. So you get those lovely flowers coming back as long as you keep the plant nice and healthy. Like I said, cutting it and giving it enough trimmings throughout the time that you have it give the plant the ability not only to grow bushier, but also to keep those vibrant purple colors on the leaves. If you allow it to grow out too much, the leaves can die that are closer to the root base, leaving you with a sort of bare pot, and the beautiful leaves all sort of trailing outside of that. And you really don't want that. So make sure that you do enough trimmings, keep it nice and healthy. And also, you want to make sure that it's not too hot or too cold for the plant. That can affect it negatively. So if you can keep it in a nice warm place that's not too hot or doesn't get too much direct sunlight, I think that'll help the plant really nicely. So as you can see here, they've sat for their allotted time in the honey. They've absorbed it, and now they're all getting put into sort of their starter planters right now to make sure that they develop that root base. Once I can see root roots reaching the bottom of the cups, then I will start thinking about repotting the plant. Another thing that I want to point out with these is you want to poke holes on the bottom so that when you do water the cuttings, it doesn't get too flooded and turn the soil into mud, essentially. If the water has nowhere to go, it will negatively affect the plant. So you want to make sure to put holes in that. Otherwise, you can end up with slurry that is not good for your plant at all. Once you're done planting all your cuttings, you want to make sure that you give them a little bit of water. Make sure that they all have a sort of saturated soil to get them really nicely started. I chose these clear cups, and you want to start with clear cups. That way you can see sort of how the water is permeating the entirety of that soil structure for the plants. So it gives you a great view to make sure that you're taking care of your plant and that you have a visual reminder of when to water, what it needs, and when it's ready to repot. So that's awesome. Once all of that is done, you're pretty much set to go. All I did after this was really put the plants under a growth light so that they could get enough sunlight without being burnt up by it. It's really nice and delicate on the plants so that you don't feel like they're getting too much or too little. You can set a timer on the one that I have, so I only really have it on for 4 hours during the day. That way, they don't get too much sunlight and get too affected by that. I also plan once they've got the good root base going and they are ready to be repotted. Make sure that, like I said, once a month you give them some sort of fertilizer that is good for these plants so that they can keep that vibrant purple color that we absolutely love in these and keep that tricolor for us so that it's all sorts of vibrant, beautiful colors. So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching and thank you for joining Couple and Nerds Presents Apartment Gardening. If you liked this video, remember to like and subscribe and also comment below to let us know what you think of the plants, of the video, and if you have any ideas for any future plants I can try out to propagate at home. Thank you.